Hey guys, welcome to week 2, module 2 of program development and grants. I hope through week 1 you're starting to gain a little bit of understanding about how grants work, the structure of grants, that they are more project based than operational based, meaning your organization. Now, you did your survey in your last discussion of your organization, so you understand your organization a little bit more and how it works and the things it does. With that, I told you to start to identify gaps in services or a need that needs to be filled. And that is more of a project-based need. It may be, for example, the need for an after-school program for at-risk youth. That's a project, not just operational costs for your center. Most grants won't fund that type of activity, just general operating costs or just to continue the mission of the organization. That's not usually how grants work. They're usually based on a project, a specific project with goals and objectives toward that project, and then an evaluation plan to help understand how you met those goals. Okay, so because they want to clearly see that they gave you the money, the funding through the grant for a specific purpose. It was used for that specific purpose, and you can show that through the evaluation. Okay. So as we move into week 2, we're going to focus a little bit more on your individual idea for your grant proposal. Now, keep in mind, as I explained in the overview video and a little bit last week, you will be drafting a proposal for your organization that you choose to use. Needs to be a nonprofit through to this fictional grant opportunity we have in the class. If you haven't had a chance yet, I suggest that you go ahead and look under right under the weekly modules. There's a tab called Proposal. Take a look at that. It has all the information in there about the funding proposal you'll be applying to. It is fictional, so there is no funding attached, but this is good practice, okay? For maybe like a foundation grant, because this one's a little open-ended, okay? Not as many restrictions. But with that, in the future, I want you guys to understand how to find funding. So that's where the assignment comes in this week, the week 2 exercise. You're going to search for funding. Okay, remember last week how we signed up for the SPIN database? Now be sure, if you haven't received your email yet, check your junk folder, because I approve those the day you do them, because I get an email. So I approve those as soon as I get them. But a lot of times the approval ends up in the junk mail. I'm not sure why. It's probably Concord's firewall or something. But anyway, check your junk mail. Now, that system works just like Google, keyword searches for something you're interested in. Okay, there is a template example underneath the assignment under the week 2 module. If you look under that specific assignment, there is a format to use to kind of try to help you guys out in understanding. So that is in the attachment. So be sure to take a look at that. And what you're doing is looking for funding for your any project, what you're thinking right now. Okay, you don't have to be set in stone. You're not married to this concept. So just something that you're interested in, or a way you might want to go. Okay. Now, finding funding is not always easy. It sometimes can take a little trial and error. It's a lot of keywords, so a lot of synonyms. Try different types of language to when you're searching until you find exactly what you're looking for, because the government or foundation may call it a little bit something different, a little bit different than what we call it. There are things, if you're looking at different types of grants for planning. There are planning grants, there are implementation grants, there are all different types. So just keep messing around with your synonyms, in your keywords to help you find the right kind of words that will help you find your funding, okay? So use that SPIN database. You can also Google. Sometimes some good things come up on Google. Just depends. SPIN is probably a better resource for you at this point. Keep in mind, now this is one of the first things I teach everyone in my office when we're looking for funding, is eligibility. the first thing when you're looking at a grant opportunity you look at is the eligibility. Now, that tells you who is eligible to receive the grant. So a lot of times you'll see a 501c3 nonprofit, institution of higher education, municipality. Some grants are limited to just states, state governments. Some are limited just to municipalities. So look at that first, because if you're not eligible, you can't apply anyway. It would be awful to put in a lot of effort toward a grant that you can't even apply for because you're not eligible. You're not an eligible entity. So that's where it becomes important to know what type of entity you are. Like we looked at last week looking at our agency. Know that you're a 501c3 or you're an institution of higher ed, or whatever type of organization you are. That way if you're eligible for the funding or not. So look at that first thing. Then you start to drill down into the what the program is looking for. A lot of times they tell you objectives, types of projects they fund, things like that. Now, keep in mind, this is a common mistake in grant writing. You cannot change the funding opportunity announcement. When you're looking at the funding, we talked about the RFP, the request for proposal. You can't change that to fit your needs. They are very specific in what they'll fund and what they will not fund. So you have to kind of morph your project toward it, or sometimes it just doesn't work. So you can't fit that round peg in the square hole. I think a lot of people try to they're like, oh, it's close enough, it'll work. No, well, it won't, because the funders want, they're very specific about what they want and need in the grant proposals they're requesting. So just keep that in mind as you're looking through the grant opportunities, okay? So take your time. That may take a little bit of time to look into some of that funding. There's also a really good video that helps you understand how to research grant opportunities as well. So take a look at that while you're going through that. As far as moving on in our discussions in week 2, this week, last week we looked at our agency. We did a little survey of the agency so we could understand. This week, we're going to start formulating that project idea, for that proposal that's due at the end of the class, okay? So start to think about, what those service gaps and what do you want to address in your grant proposal, okay? And there's a 2-part discussion this week. There's on pages 45 through 47. There's some steps there that kind of help you move through thinking about that project, okay? So be sure to look at the discussion question because there's some specific directions for each step in the discussion, okay? So take a look, read very carefully. Okay, we're also going to start drafting the needs section, the needs statement. This is very important in the sale of your grant idea, okay? Now, when I say sale, a grant application is really a sales pitch. So this is your first step in that sales pitch. You're spouting the need. Say, for example, I'm trying to write a grant for funding for an outpatient substance abuse treatment program. Well, certainly, I'm in Southern West Virginia, so certainly there are some statistics. There are some resources that show the need for that type of activity, for that type of service. Our opioid statistics are off the charts. So that's something I would put into my needs statement. So it needs to be evidence-based with professional resources, and it needs to be cited in APA format. You need to make sure that you're providing evidence to support your concept here, okay? So whatever project you're looking at, this is the part where you really start to nail down and say, okay, this is why this is very important. This is why we need this, and it's based on evidence. Because a lot of times, if you don't have good evidence to back it up, the funders are not going to look at your app, okay? So it's very important. So just keep that in mind as you're addressing that section. Now, it's a page or less right now, so just kind of get started on it, get a good draft going. Remember to do your citations in text and your references at the end for APA. I don't expect it to be a finished product, but I expect you to, put some good thought into it, okay? All right, so as in last week, discussion is due on Saturday, and then your exercise is due on Sunday. So be sure to dive right into those. We're also reading chapters 3, 6, and 8, and Appendix B in the book, which I think will help a lot with funding searches, to kind of give you some resources as well when you're looking for funding, maybe on your own. So be sure to dive into that reading this week. In all reality, those are pretty short chapters, so it shouldn't take up a great amount of time. So as we move in through week 2, please let me know if you have questions or concerns or any kind of questions about the content or anything. I'll be happy to answer any of those questions. I'm in the office all week. So you guys enjoy Module 2. Take care.